Hello, and welcome back to another episode of MedNews, where we discuss all things current in science and health. During last week's episode, we discussed the dangers of vaping, which you can find on our website at www.mednews.com. I'm your host, Molly Schulteis-Tripp, and this week we will be exploring a pressing issue in our society that is not often the topic of conversation: poverty and its relations to physical and mental health. Before we begin discussing the links between poverty and health, let's take a look at a few statistics regarding poverty in the United States. According to the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Institute for Research on Poverty, the United States has one of the highest child poverty rates in the world. As of 2012, 18.5% of non-elderly adults were living with no healthcare coverage, and 22% of children were living under the line of poverty. The official journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics declares that about 37% of children will live in poverty at some point in their lives. Among this group, infants and toddlers are more often living in poverty than older children. So what does this have to do with health? An anecdote found in a PBS NewsHour video gives viewers a first-hand look at families living in poverty. Following an Honduran family, the Fajardos, we gain insight on toxic stress. Dr. Jack Shonkoff explains that toxic stress is when the body reacts in a fight-or-flight manner, but instead of stopping after the stressful incident has occurred, it continues for long periods of time. Toxic stress is very harmful because it can cause problems in the body and developmental problems in children's brains. Everyone is susceptible to toxic stress, but Dr. Shonkoff states that it is more likely for people living in poverty to experience it. For the Fajardo family, their toxic stress began when a random drive-by shooting occurred at their home in a public housing neighborhood. Ruth was a stay-at-home mother, and one night, when all the children were asleep, the shooting occurred. Ruth states, quote, "Everything was breaking in the kitchen. It was like a horror movie," end quote. Nobody was hurt, but the two oldest daughters in the family were traumatized and began to develop toxic stress of their own. Toxic stress is especially damaging to children because the early years of childhood are crucial to the development of the brain. Toxic stress can actually prevent the creation of new cortices and synapses of the brain and decrease brain function. Our brain folds into itself to create more cortical surface area, so the more folds there are in the brain, the more space your brain has to store information. This can cause issues during childhood, such as learning disorders, poor language development, ADHD-like tendencies, and poor relationships with their peers, according to medical professionals at the University of California, San Francisco. When you consider these struggles, children and teens may find it hard to perform well in school, causing poor grades or dropping out of school completely. When this happens, there is a risk for the poverty cycle to occur for the next generation. For example, children or teens who drop out of high school are most likely to become unemployed and/or become pregnant at a teenage age. With these new factors added into the equation, there is a high chance that these individuals will continue to face the struggles of poverty in their adult lives. Another psychological factor is overcrowding in the home. This can lead to unwanted or excessive social interaction and can create problems for both adults and children. The Journal of Urban Health discusses how this may cause parents to be less verbally responsive to their children and speak in more simplified ways, which can lead to delayed development in their children and depression in the adults. One solution that aims to attack these problems found in families living in poverty is called a two-generation approach. This method differs from programs such as Head Start or child-based programs because it also targets the parents involved. If you were to provide children with skill enrichment in the classroom, but they go home to continue their unwanted habits, there will be little to no progress made. While helping parents develop life and parenting skills, the entire family will be working to better their lifestyles and potential. These interventions work with children in the schools and simultaneously work with the parents in the professional setting. Children receive help with schoolwork and developmental skills, while the parents receive necessary trainings for stable jobs. There are not only psychological factors that affect health when living in poverty, but physical ones as well. Your environment plays a big role in your life, and poor housing can have a large negative effect on individuals. The Journal of Urban Health states that almost half of the world's population lives off of $2 a day and are forced to reside in inadequate housing. This can cause both direct and indirect health problems. One major of low-income housing is heat source. For example, people who cannot afford a gas or electric stove may have to use an open fire to cook their food. Open fires increase the risk of a fire or burns and can create air pollution in the house. Other houses may not be able to afford electricity in general and rely on kerosene lamps and candles for light. These also create air pollution, and if kerosene is stored improperly, it may become a toxin risk for children. We mentioned the psychological health effects of overcrowding in houses earlier, but physically it can also lead to a quicker spread of viruses and bacteria. If an individual or their children become sick, they may also have to take the day off from work, and the illness may cost 1 or 2 paychecks to treat. An emergency room doctor working at the University of California, San Francisco Medical Center shared a personal story in an interview. He had lost an important document and was searching in the garbage for it, but instead found something rather surprising. He found patient prescriptions that were crumpled up and thrown in the garbage. Dr. Talmadge King Jr. stated, quote, "Often it's not that the patients aren't adhering to advice. It's that they can't pay for the drugs, didn't understand why they should take them, or simply that they did not feel the doctor even listened to them." End quote. If household conditions continue to cause an unhealthy environment, these individuals may be at risk of losing their job. This creates a vicious cycle of being in poor health, spending money that isn't available for treatment, not having enough money for adequate housing or food, and cycling over and over with the addition of medical bills and rent payments. While people are becoming more and more familiar with this issue, more programs are being cultivated to prevent this issue from affecting future generations. To find more information and resources about these programs, you can visit our website at www.mednews.com and join us next week when we dive into the casualties of the coronavirus outbreak. Thank you for listening. This is Molly Schultes Tripp, wishing you a happy and healthy week.